Dear congregation, I've decided to come here to the sanctuary to shoot this little video, giving you as personal a message as I can in this weird time of social isolation. It's one of my favorite places to be, and a place I want to open to you too. Soon we're going to come up with a way to structure people's individual visits here to the sanctuary if you'd like to sit and reflect and be in prayer. It's a beautiful place to be on a sunshiny day like today, when you can come and just watch the windows fill with light, and the light that kind of fills your soul almost. Thank goodness for the creativity of one of our former pastors, Bonner Teeter, who came up with the designs that would tell our story. Standing here today in front of one of the windows that symbolizes one of the most difficult aspects of our story. It's these saddles that make reference to the circuit rider tradition of Methodism, which rooted our practice of itineracy. It's pastors serving different churches, moving from one church to the next at the discretion of a bishop and a cabinet. It's in our church's DNA. It's in part of my DNA too, as several of my maternal grandfather's ancestors were Methodist circuit riders in South Carolina, some ordained by Francis Asbury himself, and generations of Methodist ministers moving from Georgia to Alabama over to Arkansas, where I grew up as a Methodist minister's son, with the itineracy forming part of my identity, my understanding. It isn't preferable or easy for your ministers or for our churches, and yet we believe that the Spirit works through it in ways that make us stronger and more vibrant. I just feel fortunate that I've been blessed to serve such a long appointment as I have, and what I've always described as my dream church before coming here and while serving this church. That's how I'd refer to it. I always wanted to serve a church on a university campus. I always wanted to serve a church with a courtyard, and for some reason I always wanted to serve a church made of stone. And here I've gotten to serve that church for the second longest of any tenures here. I'm tied with Mark Rickman for 9 years, second only to our founding minister, Guy Tetrick, who served in 2 stints, 13 years, back in the 1920s and 30s. Think back on the story of Bonner Teeter, that pastor serving this church, beginning his appointment in 1964 and going to the altar up there to reckon with the itineracy. He had a big family too, kind of like mine. And he kneeled there, the story goes, he promised God at the beginning of his appointment, if God would just let him stay here long enough, he would install these beautiful story windows instead of the geometric windows, orange and yellow, that are still in part of our church building. They'd tell the story, they'd speak to generations to come. And God did allow him to serve this congregation for longer than most, 6 years in an era when 3 to 4 year appointments were kind of the norm. I asked God something similar when I came here, and now I stand in the light of these windows. I know my leadership hasn't achieved such grandiose and enduring symbols, but I believe we have told our story in new and dynamic ways. We've reached people with a message of grace and beauty and love. We've broadened our perspective and flung our doors wide open. We've reached out to our community in perhaps some head-scratching ways in a time when I think the best thing the church can probably do is make the culture cock their head a little bit, take notice. We've also set the foundation for what is to come in the next appointment of leadership for this congregation. I may have had 3 years longer than Bonner and no windows to show for it, but I'm proud for how the light shines through you, church. I'm humbled to know that my leadership has something to do with that, and for that gift, I thank you. I'll never forget the lessons I learned here, and that we have a lot more light to impart, University United Methodist Church. I'll be interested to watch and applaud from a distance.